Most of us have heard the popular urban legend story, a young woman who is home alone. Often she is a babysitter. She gets a creepy phone call asking, "Have you checked on the kids?" She calls the police and reports it. A few minutes later, the phone rings again. She answers it. Terrified it may be the voice again, only to find out it's the police. They have traced the call and tell her, "The calls are coming from inside the house." Most of these fictional urban legends are rooted in fact somewhere along the line. Mark Douglas Stebbins of Ferndale, Michigan, was just 12 years old when he did not return home from an American Legion Hall on February 15, 1976. His body was found 4 days later, wearing the same clothes he was last seen in, lying on a pile of wood and dirt in the parking lot of a local office building in Southfield, Michigan. Detectives stated that he had been found strangled and sexually abused with a foreign object and had 2 lacerations to the left rear of his head. Rope marks were evident on both of his wrists and ankles, indicating that he had been bound during his captivity. Joe Robinson, just 12 years old of Royal Oak, left her home on December 22, 1976, following an argument with her mother over dinner preparations. The following day, her bicycle was found behind a local hobby store, before her body was found alongside Interstate 75 in Troy, within view of Troy Police Station, on the morning of December 26th. She had been shot in the face with a 12-gauge shotgun, and her body was fully clothed and wearing the backpack she had taken with her when she left home. Autopsy reports from the medical examiner revealed that Robinson had been fed and cared for at least 3 days before she was killed. Christine Marie Melich, 10 years old of Berkeley, was reported missing on January 2, 1977, after she failed to return home from a 7-Eleven store on 12 Mile Road at Oakshire. A mail carrier found her fully clothed body 19 days later on the side of a back road in Franklin Village. She had been smothered to death less than 24 hours earlier, and her body lay within view of nearby homes. Timothy John King, 11 years old, left his home in Birmingham and went to a pharmacy on the evening of March 16, 1977. After he failed to return home, an intensive search covering the entire Detroit metropolitan area was conducted. His body was found on the evening of March 22nd by 2 teenagers in a shallow ditch alongside Gill Road in Livonia. He had been sexually assaulted with a foreign object and suffocated approximately 6 hours earlier. Autopsy results revealed King had eaten his favorite food, Kentucky Fried Chicken, shortly before his death. He had also been cleaned, bathed, and groomed prior to his suffocation. After the discovery of the 4th body, authorities had begun to realize the similarities between all of these murders. Reports were released warning the public that a serial killer was possibly operating in the Oakland County area. Michigan State Police led a community of law enforcement officials devoted solely to the investigation of these murders. After King had disappeared, an eyewitness came forward and assisted with a composite sketch of the alleged killer, including a description of the suspect's vehicle, a blue AMC Gremlin. The alleged killer was described to be a white male between the ages of 25 to 35, with shaggy hair and long sideburns. Law enforcement was so intent on catching the child killer that they temporarily suspended Fourth Amendment rights of local residents. This gave law enforcement the ability to pull over and search every single AMC Gremlin they saw in the area. In the end, it was concluded that the description of the vehicle was a red herring, and police concluded their pursuit of that lead. Over the course of the investigation, the task force followed up on more than 18,000 tips, which resulted in 24 arrests on unrelated charges and uncovered a multi-state child pornography ring on North Fox Island in Lake Michigan. However, to the disappointment of the families and the entire community, no progress was made on the capture of the child killer, and the task force was disbanded in 1978, and the investigation was turned over to the state police. Ted Lamborghini became the top suspect after discovery of his involvement in a child pornography ring, and in 2006 he was facing 19 separate counts of sexually assaulting children. Although there was never enough evidence to link Lamborghini to the child murders, the circumstances became complex. Lamborghini rejected an offer for a reduced sentence in exchange for taking a polygraph test in regards to the 4 killings, and instead immediately pled guilty to 15 sex-related counts involving young boys. This was highly unusual in the eyes of law enforcement for a suspect to not cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Rather than closing the case, this ended up creating even more questions for investigators. One of the most interesting persons of interest was Chris Bush, who had been taken into police custody shortly before the abduction of King. Bush's charges were later dismissed, while his co-defendant received several years in prison. Many people believe this was due to the connections that Chris had in his personal life. Bush's father was at the time the vice president of General Motors. Even more bizarre is that in November of 1978, Chris Bush allegedly killed himself with a self-inflicted gunshot to the head. However, according to police reports, there was no gunshot residue on Bush, no blood spatter, and the entry wound was between his eyes. The investigation into Chris Bush was concluded upon his death. The most recent development in the case took place in 2019 when the Investigation Discovery Channel aired a documentary about the killings. At this time, WXYZ-TV investigative reporter Heather Catallo announced that convicted predator Arch Edward Sloan had failed a polygraph test when he was interviewed by the Oakland County Child Killer Task Force. In 2012, DNA technology found that Sloan's car contained hair with the same mitochondrial profile as evidence found on the victims. However, it was not Sloan's hair. Most likely, Sloan knew the killer. So whatever happened to the Oakland County Child Killer? It seems like the families have been left with more questions than answers. Why did the murders stop? Did the killer die? Was the killer arrested on unrelated charges? Did the killer move on to some other place, and are they still out there somewhere committing these horrible acts? We may never know. But if you have any information which could lead to an arrest, or even just some closure for the families of these innocent victims, please contact the Michigan State Police.